But in particular, that somebody found this poor monkey who had been kept in a cage and treated very, very cruelly. So they brought, out of compassion, they brought this monkey from this villager and they sent it to the monastery so he could have a decent life. It was a forest monastery. So they set the monkey loose in the monastery. Obviously the monkey was very scared at first of its new people because it had never had any good experiences with humans. But because the monks were so kind and caring, and because the abbot was such a great monk, soon the monkey became very tame. And especially the monkey was just so devoted to the abbot. He was so devoted to the abbot. He was a lovely little monkey, just very tame, very sort of fluffy and furry and cuddly. So sometimes there'd be people come from Bangkok to visit this monk. But if any of those people were cheeky, if ever they said something they shouldn't to a monk, this is what the monkey would do. He'd go into the first person and just sit on their lap and allow the person to pet it, to stroke the monkey. And the monkey would just be so docile. It's lovely stroking a little nice monkey. And then he went to the second person. They would do the same. They'd stroke it. It'd be so much fun. Then he'd go to the third. When he got to the person who was cheeky, he would sit in their lap and then bite them. Just to tell them, this is the abbot, you should be more respectful. And he'd do that so often that eventually they had to send the monkey away because it was too dangerous. There's always a few cheeky disciples, even here. If I had a monkey, some of you might have got bitten by now. But anyhow, they took this monkey to this little nature reserve, which was an island, many, many acres, so it could be protected from hunters, where much wildlife lived. And this poor monkey got his deputy abbot, the second monk, to take him off to this island. And this poor monkey was just so depressed all the time. The monkey realized he'd done something wrong, and that he'd been exiled to this little island. So the poor monkey was just all depressed. When the second monk sort of dumped it on the island, the poor monkey looked back, so sad. He was missing its friends, the monks. After about a week or 10 days, the abbot, in his meditation, saw that monkey was so lonely and said, okay, he's been punished enough. Go and get him back. So he sent the second monk over to collect the monkey. And according to the story, the second monk, just when he landed in the rowboat, on this island, couldn't see anybody, just shouted the name of the monkey. And within about 2 minutes, you could hear the trees sort of shaking, and this monkey came right towards them and jumped right into his arms. He was just so excited to see a monk again, one of his friends, and to go back. So he got straight into the boat again, and the monk rowed over. On the way back, the monkey bit the second monk. Just actually to say, don't do that again. Don't leave me alone for such a long time. But it's just being a monkey, that's all. So he spent all the rest of his years in this monastery. And he became quite a character in the monastery because every time it was tea time for the monks, in those monasteries the monks would come together for tea time. And you'd always have to make a cup of tea for the monkey as well. He would not be left out. And just like all the monks were sitting there, the monkey would sit there cradling his cup of tea. It's just so sweet. He was associating so much with the kind monks that he could actually see what his future birth would be. Because when you associate that much and almost you think you're a human being, you become a human being. And one of the things he used to do is very, very protective of the monastery. If there was any loud noise, he would try and stop it. In particular, any cars or trucks which raced past the monastery, he'd try and trace them away to try and keep the monastery quiet and secluded for his friends, the monks. But one day, he chased a truck and got run over and died. That's how he died. But the abbot was in meditation at the time, and he saw the stream of consciousness leave the dead monkey and go off into the village. It was a quick rebirth because one of the women in the village was pregnant. And he saw that monkey just go into the woman's womb. He knew it had got a human birth. And when that woman gave birth, this is true, that little baby was exceptionally hairy. And that was many years ago. I haven't been back to that monastery for quite a while now. But when that baby grows up and goes to school, everybody knows that story. He's going to have a hard time in school. He'll say, you were a little monkey before. And you're a little monkey now too. He's a human being now, but it was a monkey in its past life, but everybody knows. So yeah, you can get reborn that way, but if it's a human, if it's an animal, especially a pet that's very, very close to human beings, and it's got enough good karma, because of its association, it almost identifies with being a human, and that's the birth it will take. Okay, next question. Dear Ajahn, I was wondering if you could tell me why the Buddha had hair, but all other monks have to shave their hair. I was just curious to know. Many thanks. Yeah, okay. Now, the real Buddha never had hair. But what actually happens is just the statues and the conventions and the traditions we have. It's just the first statues were made by the Greek Indians, because no matter what some of the commentaries say, there was no tradition of statues in India, not of human beings. Maybe of animals, but not humans. So the first statues, they say, were made in Gandhara, now present-day Afghanistan, where the Greeks who came with Alexander set up little kingdoms, and with it brought their culture of statues. And that knowing that the Buddha was a royal person, they actually, the back of the head was supposed to be a turban at first. And apparently, I've never seen this, they say the first Buddha statues had beards, because all Greeks had beards. They thought that the Buddha was just like them. They cast the image in their own way. So later on, obviously, they realized the Buddha didn't have any of those things. But there was still this, one of the sutras, which is quite late, came after the time of the Buddha, where you have the marks of a Buddha. They say in there, he's got a little bump on the back of the head. And there's his hair, once it was cut, only needed to be cut once, and as soon as it was cut, went into little curls. That's more like an African's hair than an Indian's hair. It was very strange. But the point was that became a tradition. However, as many monks have said, if you look actually in the original teachings, the original stories in the time of the Buddha, the earliest strand of Buddhism, you'll see there were so many occasions when people could not recognize the Buddha, where he was walking along the road and other people came across, he just looked like another monk. And that, to me and to many other people, shows the Buddha was indistinguishable from anybody else, that he too had a bald head. There's one case where this monk was traveling to see the Buddha, and the Buddha, out of compassion, traveled to see him. So they met in this little shed. I think it was a potter's shed or a cow shed. No, it was a potter's shed. And I think the other monk got there first. So when the Buddha came, he said, "Monk, if it's not inconvenient for you, can I also stay here?" He said, "Yeah, sure." And then this monk, the visiting monk, in the evening, started meditating. And the Buddha started meditating. And the monk opened his eyes, and this visitor, who was a Buddha, he didn't know it was a Buddha, was also meditating. And sitting so straight. So he meditated. So both of them meditated all night. And in the early morning, sort of when they came out of meditation, this monk said to the Buddha, he didn't know it was a Buddha, he said, "Monk, you sit very straight. Who's your teacher?" He said, "I've got no teacher. Who's your teacher?" "Oh, my teacher's the Buddha." "What do you mean you've got no teacher? Everyone should have a teacher." He said, "I am the Buddha." Ah! And this monk sort of bowed down and asked forgiveness. "Oh, sorry. If you'd only let me know that you were the Buddha, I would have bowed and I've asked all these questions." Because he never realized. He meditated all night, never realized he was in the presence of a Buddha. There's many stories like that. Even at the end of the Buddha's life, when King Ajatasattu came to visit him in the bamboo grove, King Ajatasattu saw all these monks and had to ask, which one is the Buddha? said the one on that pillar facing east. So there's many of those accounts show that the Buddha was indistinguishable from other beings, from other monks, as far as his physical form was concerned. However, now that sometimes, for example, when we had our first Buddha statue made for our monastery, we said, look, let's get back to the original tradition. Let's make it without this bump on the head, a bald head. And the artist in Thailand said, no, we can't do that, because in art, the little bump on the head and the little snail-like hair things, he said, that actually shows it is the Buddha, not an ordinary monk. So that's actually the sign. It's like having a sign underneath, this is the Buddha. And that's actually how you know, because sometimes people find these old statues, they don't know whether it's a statue of a monk, a statue of a king, or a statue of the Buddha. So we've kept this now, little bump on the head and little hair on there. It doesn't mean that the Buddha looked like that. It just means that this is a sign that this statue represents the Buddha. Okay? Next question here. During meditation, when a stable nimitta appears or in jhana, the five senses disappear, meaning breathing has ceased. In medical physical condition, you are dead. My apology for a stupid question. It's no question is stupid. People who don't ask questions are stupid. Everyone who asks a question is doing the karmic courses of being wise. The stable nimitta appears, when a stable nimitta appears, the five senses are not really disappeared yet. They're still sort of potentially there. Sometimes when a nimitta appears, you can still hear sounds, but in the distance. Feel the body, but it's not really central to your field of attention. As the nimitta really gets brighter and more stable, those sounds are just so far away you can't hear them. The feelings are so distant you can't feel them. As the nimitta stabilizes and grows in intensity, the five senses get less and less and less and less until they turn off. In a jhana, they've turned off. That's why the jhanas are described as vivichewa kamehi. Kama, K-long-A-M-A, literally means the five senses. Like kama loka, the world of the five senses. When those five senses are abandoned, that is jhana. That's one of the sides of jhana. So that in a jhana there's no sense activity at all with the five senses. However, you are still breathing. You just don't know it, that's all. It's only in the fourth jhana that breathing absolutely stops. So, if you get into first, second or third jhana, someone looks at you, so light is your breath. Maybe they might not see it, but you are still breathing. The fourth jhana, you're not. So, in a physical condition, medical condition, the fourth jhana, it looks like you're dead. But you ain't. So you're still there. It's just similar to being dead. How do you know your teacher is teaching the right thing or not? Thank you. How you know is to try it out. But don't believe, don't be gullible. So, what your teacher says, does it make sense? Is it reasonable? Is it rational? Does it accord with your experience? Number one. Number two, does it accord with the teachings in the original teachings of the Buddha? Check that out. Does it lead to peace, harmony, freedom? Check that one out as well. So you can actually see, would it make sense? Is it accordance with the original teachings of the Buddha? Number three, does it actually lead to peace and harmony and freedom? Those are the three things you can use to test out if what your teacher is saying is true or not. Also, just check out the character of the teacher. Because if the teacher is teaching these things and he can't do it himself or herself, then you can actually doubt the teachings. If they can't do it, what right have they to actually to tell other people to do these things? So check out the virtue, meditation, and wisdom of the teacher. So then you can actually know if what the teacher is saying is true. So I've got four things there. Number one, to make sure it's reasonable, rational, according to your experience. Number two, that it leads to peaceful states of mind. Number three, it's in accord with the original teachings of the Buddha. And the last one, number four, that so the teacher's practicing what he teaches. Recently, when I was in Singapore, I had a free morning, and it was the Buddhist library was doing a little charity walk. And I thought, it's about time I helped them out. So, without them really knowing, I got in the car and I joined their charity walk. And at the start of the charity walk, so they never expected me, here's Ajahn Brahm, so they invited me to give a little talk. I was sitting at the table, there was one of the ministers there. I forget which minister it was, called Boon One or something. I haven't got his name correctly. One of the ministers, the Buddhist ministers of Singapore. And then I asked him, when I was sitting there just having a cup of tea before the ceremony started, I said, are you going to do the walk? He said, no, all I'm going to do is to give a talk, because I have got other business. So, you're not someone who walks the talk, you're someone who talks the walk. And he laughed, and he mentioned that in his speech. He said, I'm a minister who talks the walk, but I don't walk the talk. Because as soon as he finished talking, he went off. So, if you are a real teacher, you will actually practice what you teach. So if you see anyone saying, be compassionate, be kind, they sit up here and they tell you off, what sort of teacher is that? If they're cruel to you, then they should not teach compassion. Venerable Ajahn, is it appropriate for a monk and nun to have their meals together in a closed room with no one else with them? Can a woman enter a monk's room when he is around? Thank you with metta. Okay, if a monk and a nun are alone together, even if they're both arahats, who knows? Tongues will wag. Because who knows what they do alone together? Now, this is the trouble here. It's not that you have to be pure, you have to be seen to be pure. That's most important. Because look, one of the things my father said when I was young, it was one of his jokes. He used to say, what fun does a monk have? He said the answer is none. Get it? Because in culture people think the monks and nuns play around together, and some of them actually do. So even if you might be a really good monk, a really good nun, for the sake of both of your reputations, to stop people wagging their tongues, to stop the suspicions of the malicious, that we always have a man present. Or in the nuns' monastery, if they're alone with a man, they have another woman present to keep it even. So it protects everybody's reputation. Because you know just how people like to gossip. You know how to people, sometimes they think, Ajahn Brahm, what does he do? He's all right when he's up here, but what does he do in his room? Has he got any magazines under the bed? Which is why I tell people that you can actually go into my room at Serpentine every time you like and have a look and see what's under the bed, or anywhere. You can actually look in all the drawers and find out how I live. I've got nothing to hide at all. So the point is, this is why it's good to have the separation there. And it's also good because not all monks are arahats, not all nuns are enlightened. And sometimes just association. If you get a young monk, you get a young nun, they may start off with just like talking Dhamma together. But hormones are hormones, nature is nature. And after a while, the Dhamma talks to other things, goes to other things. You like each other, and after you like each other, you get romance, fantasies, and sure enough, there's an engagement ring next. And then a wedding ring and supper ring coming afterwards. So you've got to protect your monks and nuns, especially the young ones. Because if ever you've tried to be a monk or a nun, you know how hard it sometimes is. So protect them. So that's why it's good for monks and nuns to be slightly separate. If there's lots of people around, for example, sometimes we go to these house dhanas, then it's okay for the monks and nuns, as I did the other day at Dr. Ang Beng Chu's house in Singapore. There was about 2 or 3 monks on one side of the table, a couple of nuns on the other side of the table. But it was in her house, lots of other people around, nothing wrong with that at all. And can a woman enter a monk's room when he is around, as long as many of other people are around as well? But if a woman sneaks into my room at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock afterwards, even if she's only there to sweep the room, you think, what did I see? I saw a woman go into Ajahn Brahm's room. So of course you don't want to do that. Because you don't know what goes on. Even it might be the best reasons. That's why please, all the women, it's not that I'm uncompassionate to women. It's not that Buddha was sexist.